What's going on, everybody? I'm back with another video. This video is going to be looking at the match of the season in the Champions League between Real Madrid and PSG. But before we get into the tactics behind the match, check out OneFootball. It's a great app to use when you're following all your favorite teams and the big matches and big news surrounding all the biggest games, biggest leagues all around the world. It's the app I use. You can see me scrolling through the app to the right of the screen, and the video is brought to you by them today, and there will be a link to OneFootball in the description. So show your support, download the app. It's clutch for all the latest and everything football. It's a must-have and completely free. It's a completely free download in the App Store. Also, as always, check out both my books. There's links in the description to them as well on Amazon, and check out Keyframe. It's how I'm making this video. Now let's get right into the tactics behind the match. So Real Madrid, when they would defend deeper, they would go with a 4-1-4-1, which would then show flexibility and use of man orientation that would then make them look like a 4-5-1 to then control the threat between the lines of Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe. So we would then see PSG's offensive structure all centered around their three biggest players. So Messi playing primarily in the right half space, Neymar through the left, and Mbappe through the center, with a lot of fluidity among these three players, as we see here, with Mbappe and Neymar staggering themselves towards the left half space. Now PSG's structure would all be built around these players using single width and an asymmetric back four to create a three-man build-up, often seeing Pereira drop alongside the two central defenders to create a makeshift back three in their build-up phase. Then we would have Paredes and Verratti as our double pivot to try and add some security in their build-up so they couldn't get countered on as easily because of the lack of pressure and counter pressure that we have from our front three of PSG. But in the end, there were a lot of holes when Real Madrid won the ball because of the fullbacks going so high and wide, leaving space through the half space to then transition through, and the double pivot couldn't support the press and block off key areas that their back four or their three-man build-up couldn't protect. Now we see the same build-up shape with Pereira dropping alongside the two central defenders, creating a back three. We have our double pivot controlling transitions and circulating possession, as well as creating avenues to find the three players between the lines, Messi, Neymar, and Mbappe. Mbappe dropping deeper, Neymar going higher, and we see often we didn't have many opportunities for PSG to get these three players free between the lines with a diagonal passing option leading into them to create superiority against Real Madrid, because in the first half they went with their 4-1-4-1, and now in the second half we see them shift, make some substitutions, and allow them to move to a system that was more friendly when transitioning to a 5-4-1. So what this did was it not only allowed them to have a midfield that was able to shift from side to side and block off key areas, but it also allowed central defenders to jump into space between the lines, prevent these players from turning and creating superiority. So as we see here, the central defender that would then be responsible for Mbappe would jump. They'd still have a numerical advantage with their three central defenders in their defensive phase, so it would then force Mbappe to either play backwards or sideways, and then allow Real Madrid to keep their compactness, control key areas between the lines, and maintain control over the match. Now the big problems for PSG came not only in transition but also in their defensive phase. They went with a 4-3-3, which typically saw their back four and midfield three do all the work defensively, as their front three didn't press or drop in to create a midfield 4 or 5 that often, and when they did so, they didn't do so with the right intensity that made them very passive. So Real Madrid had a lot of success finding their wide fullbacks in the wide area and simply progressing around the PSG block. Then the players that would have to go and press would be either the midfielders or a fullback, which would then pull their shape to one side too much and vacate the opposite side enough for them to progress, often through a midfielder, either Toni Kroos or Luka Modric, switch to the weak side to then progress and exploit space, or it would overstretch midfield connections that would then lead to more dangerous opportunities between the lines through inverting wingers or Valverde jumping between the lines. But one of the biggest keys for Real Madrid using their wide fullbacks was the fluidity they had among their wingers and their midfielders. So Toni Kroos and Modric often drop deeper or wider, then pulling the PSG shape into inefficient areas, while Valverde and the two wingers for Real Madrid would then invert, playing between the lines and taking up dangerous positioning. Now here's a setup where we'll show where Real Madrid go from a 4-3-3 with wide fullbacks to a rather unorthodox approach in their structured possession. So we have a typical 4-3-3 with a narrow front three with their two wingers occupying defenders and forcing PSG to defend very narrow. We also see PSG using their back four to create access to Real Madrid's fullbacks and defending with numerical equality at the time. Then we have our midfield three, maintaining compactness within the team with their passive front three when defending. So now what we'll see is Real Madrid players dropping from the midfield between central defenders into wide areas and into deeper positions. So what will happen, it'll be completely vacant in the middle of the field from Real Madrid, with the players pretty much all occupying positions of depth, width, and height, which then ultimately unravels the PSG structure completely, giving Real Madrid space to dynamically access and hurt PSG through. So now, just a few seconds later, Real Madrid, we see Toni Kroos dropping between central defenders, Luka Modric in the wide area, and now Valverde dropping between central defender and fullback as well, which creates an overload in wide areas and creates a very unorthodox Real Madrid shape with almost no players occupying space between the lines, which completely disrupts the defensive movements of PSG because of their man-oriented aspects within their defensive organization. So what we then see here, the ball is being circulated, and then Dani Carvajal will simply be able to progress or combine with teammates to then create dangerous situations going forward for Real Madrid. So now as the ball is circulated, we still have our back three, but now we have the space that Real Madrid can use to look to progress through. And from the wing, it's very easy for these players to invert and play a simple 1-2 combination, or have a higher player drop deeper into this space to access it and easily progress past the PSG defensive setup that has completely fallen apart in this instance, just by the simple movement from Real Madrid of dropping their midfielders either deeper or wider and creating space simply by moving into deep line playmaking positions. And rather than keep compactness and shift as a unit, PSG use their man orientation and concede very dangerous space in this area. And that's where we're going to wrap up the analysis. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.